longer way. There's, I think, a huge expansion of citizen science. There are many platforms for collecting, sharing, curating, and checking data and making data available to people all around the world. So there's a big increase in interest in citizen science and the technology that can support that. There's also a lot of tracking data. There are many, many studies fixing trackers to shorebirds and tracking their migration. So we increasingly know a lot about where shorebirds are going on their migrations. And coupled with or feeding on all of that is an increasingly high quality scientific community around the flyway analysing all of this data. And there's a real kind of need to have data sets that can be fed straight into scientific analyses that tell us things about our shorebird populations and how they're doing and what we need to be doing for conservation. And there's a couple of important points of context here. If we want to understand what's happening to shorebird populations, there's, I guess, two ways of doing it. The first one is to try to create population estimates of shorebirds and to update those population estimates every now and then to try to understand if the overall population sizes of our shorebirds have increased or decreased or stayed the same. And there are a number of efforts to create population estimates. And having been involved in some of them myself, and I think many of us are aware, they are very difficult exercises. There's a lot of uncertainty in generating a population estimate. There's often very wide confidence intervals. So even if our estimate changes from one period of time to another, it's difficult to know if that represents a real change in the population. Of course, the other way of doing this is to try to estimate population trends so that we can make clear statements using statistical analyses to understand whether our populations are going up or down or staying the same. And there's been lots of progress in doing this. There are many regions around the flyway, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, increasingly China, where regional and even national analyses of population trends have become possible and have been done. But we're not yet at a point where we can make population trend analyses at the level of our entire flyway. So we're still not able, I think, to join up all the pieces of this monitoring that's happening around the flyway. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of what I see as challenges to achieving this kind of joined up flyway-wide monitoring. And I'll outline what these challenges are, but I think also what some of the solutions to those challenges are. I believe actually we do have solutions for most of the problems. The first big challenge is that we have lots of individual databases all around the flyway where monitoring data are being stored. There are some exceptions to this. The Asian waterbird census, for example, that is an attempt to collect beyond those typical national boundaries. And I'm sure Tej will talk about that in a moment. But even with those efforts, there are many other high quality databases that are fragmented around our flyway. This often means there's limited flow of data from one part of the flyway to another. There can be a limited flow of data from the people collecting the information to those who might want to use that information for science or for management. There are language barriers around our amazingly diverse flyway that make it difficult to connect and have data sets really speak to each other and interact with each other. There are lots of difficult issues around data ownership. Who collects this data? Who owns that data? Under what conditions is it shared, and so on. These are really important issues that can result in fragmentation and the collection of lots of different data. There are some solutions for these kinds of fragmentation issues. Common standards for collecting, what kind of information do we collect? Can we agree on sets of common standards which mean that different databases could, at least in theory, talk to each other, enabling large-scale analyses to be done? There are increasing advances in database interoperability, which is a pretty long word for basically saying ways of getting databases to talk to each other. And this can now be done in some really smart ways without necessarily giving up ownership of a particular piece of, of a particular data set. Having databases talk, but not necessarily having your data flow or be lost from under your ownership. So there are some interesting solutions that can reduce this fragmentation. Another big challenge, I think, is low data readiness. We've noticed in many of the large-scale analyses that we've done that often a project starts and we realize that the data are not quite ready for analysis. And of course, this is typical for many research projects. That's not unusual, and it's not a criticism at all of databases. But it's often the case that data needs cleaning. There may be errors. There may just also be things that just need to be tidied for a particular analysis, not that they're mistakes necessarily. So this means it can take many months, sometimes even over a year in some of the projects I've been involved with, of kind of sorting out data sets and trying to clean them up and get them all lined up with each other. And that kind of low data readiness can create delays in producing analyses of the data that we've spent so much time collecting. And once again, there are, I think, some fairly clear solutions to this kind of challenge. Processes that continually check the data, that provide mechanisms to update errors that are identified back in the original database. So really making sure that our databases are alive and constantly updating and kind of becoming more and more correct and ready for analysis over time. So thinking about our data sets not as static things which become historic, but as living databases that are continually error checked and updated. Another really big challenge is simply gaps in survey coverage. And we see this in Australia, which is a very large country, and there are many parts of the continent where there's relatively limited data, right? And that's even within the context of a country that has overall, very good monitoring. Of course, we can all point to places around our flyway where there are really important gaps in survey coverage. It's really difficult to get even coverage of all the important shorebird places that we would like to have in our data sets. And I think the solutions to some of these problems are kind of much more difficult to implement than some of the previous solutions. We may need formal analyses that really try to prioritize where are the places that we really need data from. Do we just try and fill all of the gaps, or do we focus our limited resources on particular places that will give us the most important information? So, can we do those kinds of analyses both within countries like Australia, but also around our flyway to work out, where are the most important set of core sites that we really need to get monitored to keep our finger on the pulse of our flyway. Sometimes this kind of achieving good survey coverage needs some top-down planning. It may be that somebody needs to organize the monitoring and say, right, we need to go to these sites. How do we make that happen, right? In the case of Australia, much of the monitoring, and again, this is not a criticism, it's just a historical fact, much of the monitoring has been ground up, been driven by community groups who have been immensely dedicated and have gone where they can and when they can. And how do we match those two things up, right? That citizen science, community group, capacity and dedication with some top-down planning on where the most important monitoring could happen. And this kind of effort is going to involve funding surveys to go to particular places. It can't just rely on free effort from community groups and citizen scientists. So this is a big challenge to solve. Another challenge is metadata, and I'm sure other speakers will touch on this during the session today. Often we have inadequate metadata to really understand how to interpret particular pieces of monitoring data. For example, the boundaries of areas that have been surveyed may be unclear. Those boundaries may change over time, which is a very difficult problem to deal with in analyses. Sometimes it's unclear how much survey effort has been put into a particular survey, whether all sub-sites have been visited, how many people, how much time was spent, was there any kind of unusual circumstances around a particular survey. And these kinds of data are really important in analyses to help us interpret what's happened. One of the most important ones is distinguishing zero counts from no counts. If there are data missing from a roost, does that mean that maybe that roost site was inundated by a spring tide on that particular occasion, and that's why there's no count? Or was it available but there were no birds there? These things are these details are really important to make sure that the analyses are not biased. So again, this comes back to having, I think, reasonably robust common standards around data collection. And this group of people on this call is extremely well placed to be talking about and thinking about what these standards should look like. So I'm nearly through with the talk, but I want to just quickly spend some time thinking about the social context. So I've been through a number of challenges in this talk so far, and I think most of those challenges are quite technical. And I think we have solutions to them. We know how to make databases talk to each other. We know how to create common standards for monitoring and so on. So technical solutions to those problems, they exist, they already exist. But getting to a kind of comprehensive flyway-wide monitoring from where we are now, I think is mostly a social process, right? We know technologically what to do, but we have to try and move forward as a community, I think, of Shorebird enthusiasts and monitorers around the flyway. And there's a lot of social change there. How do we buy in? How do we all have a shared vision of what flyway-wide monitoring looks like and contribute to that? Very rightly, people who are collecting on-ground data have a very strong sense of ownership around the data that they're collecting. Data can be a really important part of identity and purpose for groups who are collecting this information. There's a lot of reliance on volunteers, and that's a big advantage in the sense it's a huge resource, but it's also a challenge. You can't tell a volunteer to suddenly go to a very remote location and survey the birds. It could cost a fortune. It may not be possible to do that. Resourcing is often very limited. And again, that's a social decision amongst the stakeholders that we all talk to in governments, in NGOs and elsewhere. So I guess ultimately I see the need for a process of designing together what this future looks like. How do we get to this kind of unified monitoring framework in the future from where we are now? And I want to reiterate that we are starting from a position of strength. There's an enormous amount of interest, dedication, and great data from around the flyway, but kind of doing it even better and moving forward together is an intensely social process. So I mentioned most of the points that I've raised tonight have been taken from this paper, which is free to download from a website. I'll drop I'll drop the link into the chat in a moment. So if you want to read more, do read that paper, and thanks to all of those co-authors there who helped put together the ideas. And thank you all very much for listening.
Thanks a lot, Professor, for the wonderful presentation. Give us the overview on the status of the shorebird monitoring in our flyway. Really appreciate. So may I see any comments? There's nothing in chat. I think everyone is very much enjoy your presentation. Okay, I see a hand raised by Danny. Danny, please.
Hi, Rich. Very, very nice talk. I was just going to add one thing that I think could be really helpful. It's we need some provision to get information back to the counters. It's very discouraging when you send your data into a black box and you don't see anything that comes out of it. And even when lovely papers come out of it, if they come out every 5, have a quick way of reporting the general picture from your counts that can go back to the counters, because they often don't have great analysis skills, so they can't do it themselves. If there's a way to get feedback to counters quickly, I think it would really help to grow any international sort of scheme.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And shout out to BirdLife Australia, which have an increasingly sophisticated platform for doing that kind of feedback. I think you're completely right. And that's also a benefit of scale, right? So if we can move towards this kind of large flyway scale initiative, then the IT supporting that only needs to be developed once and can be developed pretty centrally and maintained fairly centrally. So I think you're right. But the difficulty is the more fragmented all the data sets are, each kind of data custodian has to come up with their own ways of reporting back to counters. So you're totally right. And I think scaling up could help us achieve that.
I see another hand raised by Micha. Micha, please.
Thanks, Rich, and hi, everyone. Sorry, I typed this out in the chat, but I probably didn't do a very good job. I guess I just wanted to flag, I mean, I agree that we do have solutions to a lot of the sort of broad technical challenges that you raised, but I guess it was also my impression, in recent exercises when we've tried to do trends and population estimates recently, that there actually are still quite some significant challenges in working with these data sets from counters, and that some of those are actually relevant to monitoring design. And I guess the one that always comes to my mind is this issue of how to aggregate data from counts in a reasonable way so that it can actually be used for trends. So I guess I was just wondering what you think about that. Do you think that there are actually still some technical challenges on the data analysis side? And do you think there's an opportunity to learn from some of these recent, investments in analyses to actually put out some guidelines or some thoughts or some reflections on some of the data related challenges that are still there?
Yeah, Misha, I think that's a really good point. Maybe I was too glib in saying that the technical side is completely solved. I agree with you. I think there's always ways to improve the technical side of the analyses. The particular problem, shorebird sites are often extremely complex. As you're hinting at, they can be entire estuaries where birds may be moving around between sites within the estuary. And counters may make dynamic decisions in the field about how to count the birds on that particular tide, on that particular day. There does need to be a way of kind of collecting all of those counts together and identifying whether that collection of counts is a complete survey or not of the estuary and so on. And these, of course, sound like small issues, but they, those of us who know shorebird monitoring know that it's not as simple as that. These are really complex technical issues. I think for the most part that our analyses would be vastly improved if that was fixed up. I agree. Yeah, so I do agree, and I think you're right for calling that out. The technical side of this is not 100% solved, but I think my main point is that the social side of it and the kind of moving forward together part of it is kind of the more difficult part, and in some ways it's the bit that we've found it harder to address, I think, as a community.
Thank you very much. So is there any other hand? Okay, Jerome. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Richard. Thank you for the very nice talk. I'm actually a bit surprised that this issue is also raised here, and I'm just thinking about how you thought about. I know the biggest challenge is mostly on the society side, but also I'm thinking about how to communicate data standards between people who do the monitoring surveys. And I'm not. I think you may be aware that there's also the GBIF or the TEDWIC has also brought up a Humboldt standard for ecological inventories. That's a new set of data standard that hopes to cover many things you said about the data interoperability among monitoring data sets. And I was just thinking, I would like to know that how you think about the existing data standards. Is it like already a ground base that is probably good for people to rely on and try to practice on it, or you think there's still a lot need to be discussed on these kind of data standards? And thank you.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I must confess, I haven't spent time studying, lots of options for common data standards. I think my sense would be that Tage is more likely to know about this than me, that there may be examples from other flyways. I think one of the issues is that shorebird monitoring, I think it does have many basic similarities with other forms of biodiversity monitoring. So I'm sure we could learn a lot from existing standards across biodiversity monitoring of various kinds. I think it also has a number of quite specific issues that are quite important of the type that Misha was just raising, which can be deal breakers in terms of getting the analyses right. So I think beginning with data standards that are out there, but then shaping them in a way that really works for our group of birds, I think would be the way to go. Yeah.
Thank you very much for Professor Fuller and the participants who have raised their questions. Really appreciate for your participation and support. While we are planning to do a breakout discussion session at the end of this webinar, so do stay with us so that we can talk more in the breakout rooms on the views and comment how we improve shorebird monitoring. Thanks a lot, Professor Fuller, again. Really appreciate. So our next speaker is Dr. Tej Mengko. He has been worked with Wetland International for many years on many migratory waterbird and wetland conservation projects. So he now wears many titles on wetland and waterbird conservation, and he's today presenting as a senior advisor to Wetland International. Let's welcome Dr. Mengko, and he will be presenting the Asian Waterbird Census Framework for Shorebird Monitoring in the East Asian Australasian Flyway. Dr. Mengko, please.
Thank you, David, for that very good introduction. It's a pleasure to be here for this meeting and presentation, and it's a tough act to follow Rich in his presentation, who's really outlined very well some of the main issues and opportunities for shorebird monitoring at a flyway scale. and I'm happy to pick up on some of these points in a little more detail, and to use the framework that was mentioned, the Asian Waterbird Census Framework, as one mechanism for promoting shorebird monitoring in the flyway. And really, it's something from the list of participants, I can see that many of you are actually contributing to this monitoring program. So it's wonderful to be speaking to you on this topic. I'd just like to mention that I'm here in Gland in Switzerland at the moment at the Ramsar Conference of Parties Standing Committee, which is discussing this morning, just after this meeting, about how the convention can develop a process of regular updates of waterbird population estimates, because the waterbird population estimates globally was last produced in 2012. Fortunately for the East Asian Oscillation Flyway, with input and great support from many of you in this meeting, we have with the East Asian Oscillation Flyway Partnership and partners and experts produced the first conservation status review to review the population estimates and update them, both in terms of population size and trends. And therefore, there is a slightly newer set of data available for partners to use. Similar processes don't exist for the rest of the world except in the African Eurasian region. So the discussions in the Ramsar meeting just now are about how can we have global processes to support updates of these estimates and trends. So that's just a little bit of context about how important the work that we are talking about is feeding into a global process besides the flyway level work. Now, the East Asian Oscillation Flyway Partnership, in its strategic plan, has Objective 3, which talks about, or refers to the need to enhance flyway research and monitoring activities to build knowledge and to promote exchange of information on waterbirds and their habitats. And it talks about two outcomes: the need to set up national monitoring systems to assess the status of the waterbirds. Either these need to be established or maintained or further enhanced. And we'll go into a little bit of detail about this. And the second is the conservation status review. And I'll show you in the next few slides what has been done with you all in the last few years to produce such a first review. As has been mentioned, the Asian Waterbird Census is a census that covers Asia and Australasia, and it's part of a global census, and the focus is to monitor all waterbird species. It covers much of the globe and has been undertaken or initiated way back in the 1960s. It is undertaken in January, February in many countries, although we do include data from December where it's available. And in some parts of the world, the census is repeated in July. There are three basic objectives. One is to receive and obtain information on waterbird populations at wetlands that are used for monitoring of the populations and evaluation of the sites. The second is to monitor the status and condition of the wetlands themselves. And thirdly, and quite importantly, is to encourage greater interest and support for conservation. The census is a process that starts from the ground with a large network of volunteer counters undertaking the surveys, making that information available to be summarized and used at the national level, and where there are where the national coordination system is broken into state coordinators or provincial coordinators, the data may go to them first to produce information summaries at that level. Also importantly, to check that information before it reaches the national level. And the national coordinators are a network of either government or NGO or individuals who are responsible for coordination of the census in their country. That information that they collate is fed upwards to the level of the flyway, and Wetlands International plays that role in the East Asian Oscillation Flyway, which overlaps with the Central Asian Flyway. So our office here in the Netherlands is responsible for that. Tom Langendoen is the database manager. You're probably familiar with him, and I help to provide strategic coordination for this. Many of the coordinators are, I think, on this call as well, so that's really wonderful. And thank you so much for all your hard work in making the data available to Wetlands International as a way to make that information available for flyway scale analysis. Sorry. We follow a standard methodology, and we'll come back to this. This has been published and updated a few times. There is scope for improvement, and this is where I think the kinds of points that Rich was making in his last presentation can feed into such a process. The information that we receive is uploaded either directly by the national coordinator or regional coordinator, and we then summarize information. We don't show the raw data on our website, and every year we update it for the periods, the latest 5-year period. I'm showing you here just for migratory or the shorebirds, a set of shorebirds, and these are counts that default to the month of January, but you can choose where every month you'd like to see the information, and you can choose different populations or species, different flyways. This is focused just on the East Asian Oscillation Flyway, which should be of most interest to the participants on this call. Within the Flyway Partnership and the first conservation status review that I referred to earlier, we did include 76 populations of 60 shorebird species across these different families. And this is part of a larger suite of waterbirds that are covered by the partnership. The partnership covers only migratory waterbirds, but the Asian Waterbird Census covers all waterbirds, whether they are migratory or resident. So this is just to provide the context for that. As David mentioned at the start, the status of the species is in terms of their red listing are really showing that there are an increasing number of species and populations which are on decline, both within this flyway and globally, and there's need to do more to conserve them, including by conserving their habitats. And the quality of information we have on population size and trends can be very variable depending on how much effort is put into monitoring these species, how easy it is to monitor them, and the geographic coverage of the monitoring compared to the geographic coverage of that species. We've got a number of species for which we have the estimates, but for one population, the Kentish plover or Alexandrinus nihonensis, we do not have yet a population estimate. So this is the only population within the CSR1 that does not have a population estimate. And if we look at the total estimate of all the migratory shorebirds in the flyway, the estimate is between 8 and 16 million individuals. And again, this reflects on what Richard was talking about in terms of the quality of information and monitoring and coming up with finer estimates. In terms of information on their population trends, we can see in this graph that a large proportion of the birds are shown to be in a decreasing trend. An almost equal number are known, a very small proportion increasing, and a fair proportion stable. But that is based on information of different quality. And here you can see only 10% of the information is of good quality, 20% is reliable. 33% and 37% are either poor or for which we have no idea. So the trend quality really shows that we don't have a lot of confidence in a lot of the estimates in terms of their reliability, let's say, for making good decisions. So again, we need to improve the information and the analysis to be able to understand what's happening. And some of the challenges of for that were discussed by Richard in the last talk. So if we go ahead to where we need to be making a difference and working with everybody for that, I'll be moving now to the recommendations that came out of the first conservation status review. I'll run through them quickly. Please do have a look at them in the publication. And the first was the need to have a more comprehensive flyway monitoring program for all the EAFP populations. Again, this was for the migratory birds, so we need to at the same time be thinking about resident populations of birds, and to prioritize populations for which there are no size or trend estimates, to be looking at surveys at special areas where the birds might congregate during the breeding season or during migration at bottlenecks, or other types of surveys that are needed for species that can't be covered through a standard monitoring program such as the Asian waterbird census, because they may be very secretive and need other monitoring techniques. The second is to maximize the impact of ongoing programs that may be undertaken for single species, so that although they are focused on single species, they are collecting information on the different waterbirds, as well as undertaking assessments of the wetlands themselves, because this is very important information. And if efforts are being put in to undertake surveys for one species, hopefully the outcomes can be maximized for conservation by looking more widely at the other species as well. And the second is to ensure that the information being collected at the local level, national level, is being fed to the national partners for incorporation into the waterbird census database. The second recommendation has focused on capacity building, and there's a specific decision from the last meeting of partners in Brisbane calling for the development of these national monitoring guidance, including standards for the methods to monitor different waterbird species. Here I've focused just on shorebirds. The second is to strengthen the monitoring efforts through establishment of stronger national and site partnerships, and use the EAFP guidance that has been developed for that. The third is to obviously strengthen and resource the monitoring programs that are ongoing, and this could be through the not just the counts that are undertaken in January during the current plan and timing of the census, but also to expand that where possible to regular counts monitoring sites on a monthly basis or even more frequently where possible. This does not mean they need to be done at all the sites across the country, but to a suite of sites that helps to understand the importance of those sites and to be monitoring the populations more coherently. And obviously, we've seen that there are gaps in the data, and these may be real gaps in terms of where data is not being collected and where counts are being undertaken and that data is not flowing into the regional analysis. So there, we need to look at how to manage that better. And although we already have a partnership of the coordinators and their networks, there may be a way to reinvigorate that in some way to ensure that we are collecting and sharing the outcomes of this monitoring data in a more sustainable way. So whether a new partnership could help, and this is something that we need to discuss further with the partners in the partnership, in the flyway. So based on those recommendations, how do we fly forward together to conserve our migratory shorebirds? Well, the strategic plan for the partnership, I showed this earlier, Objective 3, which talks about flyway monitoring. And there are 2 indicators which are being picked up in the decisions, and that is calling for a standardized monitoring methodology for waterbirds, and that is used by the national coordinated monitoring programs. And the second, obviously, is that all the partners are able to undertake this in these monitoring programs. The decision of the last MOP specifically called for an inclusion of a plan to develop a robust collaborative monitoring program. And it's not just a monitoring program, but importantly, an analysis framework, because as Richard mentioned, you can collect information, but how well can you analyze it to make meaningful results from it, I think is very important. So we have the opportunity for the Shorebird working group to be working with the other working groups and task forces to develop such a program and a framework. And this would help to develop more effective national guidelines that could be used both to achieve monitoring, to get information that feeds into the updated waterbird population estimates and trends, but also to be better monitoring the status of the network sites and potential network sites, using both the AWC as one mechanism, but other monitoring programs where they exist as well. So we need to think broadly about how to achieve this. And this is something we've been discussing also with the Flyway Secretariat about how do we really move forward on this decision in a meaningful manner. We could look at monitoring in a very broader sense, and that would be the integrated monitoring of both birds and the environment, which is the habitat that the birds are using. And at the moment, the waterbird census is really just dealing with the abundance monitoring that contributes good information, but can be matched with what's often called vital rate monitoring, which then gives you better demographic monitoring of the birds. So this is happening for some species. We can be building up towards this demographic monitoring and integrated monitoring as a long-term vision, but we need to perhaps break it down into achievable chunks and first strengthen and fill the gaps to ensure that we are undertaking monitoring in a good way, in a reliable way, to get good information, better information on population size and trends as a starting point. So if we look at the need of developing a protocol, such a protocol could cover 4 elements, looking at waterbird abundance monitoring, such as through the waterbird census, looking at the wetland and habitat monitoring, such as they're being undertaken by the AWC, as well as IBA monitoring, looking at demographic monitoring, which is not covered by the AWC at the moment, and then to be integrating that in the future. We could look at the protocol being developed at different scales. This is just for single sites or sites across the country, focus on certain types of sites, subsites, and then right across the flyway. So these are things that need to be discussed further, and we would like to see in developing such a protocol that we are really clear on who are the users of this information. These could be the wetland site managers, waterbird researchers, wetland researchers, as well as the people who are doing the work, the citizen science contributors, the voluntary-based monitoring programs. So the data should be useful to the people collecting it, as well as for conservation. I won't go into the details of this, but we've been trying to sketch what such the protocol development might look like, starting from scoping, looking at the available methodologies, identifying the gaps, identifying the needs, and then looking at how we can develop a protocol together. For this, importantly, looking at a delivery mechanism, and that's the partnership, a coalition of partners across the flyway to do this. Looking perhaps at implementation through starting at implementation of a suite of sites across the flyway to pilot this approach, and then to upscale it across the flyway. Looking at the capacity needs to undertake this work, and a way to be sharing the results of this information on an ongoing basis. And as this was being developed with the EAFP in mind, to be looking at how we report jointly to the Flyway Partnership at its various meetings, as well as other international processes. So that's very quickly the sort of overall scheme within which we'd like to move forward. And we're not starting from scratch, obviously, and there's a lot of good information being collected. And it would be helpful if, as we are planning this, we look at who are the networks in each country who are available, and where do we need to fill gaps. So this sort of stock take could be useful to undertake at the same time as the development of the protocol. So if we look at, finally, this is my last slide, the next steps. The first is to seek feedback from the task forces and working groups. And this is the first presentation to the Shorebird working group on this. So I'm really keen to have your thoughts on how we can move forward on this. The next is to develop a plan with the key partners on how we can move forward, to try and organize a meeting, maybe a series of meetings to bring together the experts to take this plan forward, and according to the draft set of steps that are identified, see where we need to improve that, how we need to take it forward, look at how we ensure that it remains a priority within the partnership through developing a paper for the next meeting of partners, which will happen in the Philippines next year. And then look beyond the partnership meeting of the work that needs to be undertaken, because clearly this is something that's a multi-year process to develop and implement. And so we look forward to learning from experiences, working with you all in developing these protocols, and to be implementing it to improve better the information that's being generated across the flyway. Thank you all. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Munko. Really appreciate for your very useful presentation, overview on the IWC and the future planning of the monitoring, overall water monitoring in the flyway. So may we now invite some comments? Is there any hand raised? No hand raised, and also no. Okay, Nick, please. Yes, Nick, you please feel free to share. Sorry, Nick, we are not hearing you. There might be a speaker issue. Can you try again? Otherwise, type a message in the chat box.
I think, is that better?
Yes.
My apologies. I hadn't got my headphones plugged in properly. It's too early in the morning. Okay. Thanks. That's really, really helpful. Wearing my technical subcommittee chair's hat, we have established, I think, by MOC 4, a monitoring task force under the partnership. But as far as I can understand, that is essentially non-functional at the moment and hasn't been for a long time. And I see that the MOC 10 decision asked that task force to do some work in developing this protocol along with other groups. So is it the intent, or should we have the intent, to re-establish a core membership of that task force now, to help get the process moving in coordination and collaboration with the other working groups, such as the Shorebird group and others? And who is going to put their hand up to take a lead to try and reinvigorate that task force? I think it would be very valuable if we could have some ideas from this meeting and be able to take those to the other working groups and task forces and Secretariat. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick. H, you want to respond to this?
Yes, thank you, Nick. And that's a very good point you make. The partnership had established a monitoring task force that had been active for several years, and thereafter has not been active. The task force has met occasionally at a meeting of partners where some of the members had been present, and this then turned out to be a more ad hoc meeting of those who were there and interested in monitoring to talk about it, often just over lunch. So not a regular task force in the way that the others are organized. There is really a need to invigorate such a mechanism within the partnership to look across the needs for different species groups, so that we are developing common methodologies that ensure at least minimum data standards are being followed, so that data can be shared and data can be meaningfully used and analyzed. And I would hope that when I've talked about a coalition of partners, a subset of that would become the monitoring task force itself. I was hesitant to use the word in my presentation other than reading from the decision, because we really need to look at bringing this group back together. And I would hope that this happens not just organically, but as a deliberate step to take this forward between now and the next meeting of partners. And I would hesitantly put my hand up to try and bring this together with the help of everybody else, the thinkers and the doers. Obviously, this needs to be a task force that is of a size that allows for functional work, ease of organizing online meetings for the discussions, and where possible, a couple of workshops, hopefully at least one before the next meeting of partners. Everything tends to be resource dependent, unfortunately. So this is also an opportunity to raise with the partnership secretariat about the need for such a meeting and how we can make this happen. So happy to follow up with those of you after this meeting on this. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Tej. Richard, please.
Thanks. Sorry, just a short point. I think this is very exciting. I think Tej, it's a really great plan, and I think achieving some kind of institutional support through the partnership is great. I also think that alongside that, there needs to be a kind of broad social movement as well. And I think in a way, and you spoke to that, right, with the network of AWC counters and other types of counters around the flyway. I think it's achieving this balance, isn't it, of kind of top-down planning and also everybody moving forward together. And I think that's the real challenge, I think, to making something that will really create change and really last. So yeah, really looking forward to how we can sort of work together to solve that problem and to kind of really get this broad-based. I haven't expressed that very well, but you get the idea.
Thanks a lot, Richard. I think that's a very good input. It's a big topic and big issue, and it really requires dedicated personnel and resource to move on. But everyone is working their own part. It's just how we can put this together. Okay, let's have one more comment from Francis.
Hi, thanks, Tej, for the wonderful presentation. And I think it's a very exciting idea to have a flyway-wide monitoring protocol. And I think everybody on this call, including me, really wants to see that succeed. I'm as a student here in China, I've been doing lots of observations about how China participates in Shorebird monitoring at an international level. And I think just a quick point that I want to throw out there is that as these discussions start to take off the ground, as these discussions start off, it's probably very important to have key Chinese government representatives in the discussions in a meaningful way right from the start. So somebody from the National Forestry and Grassland Administration, or at least academics that work with them closely, perhaps that from Beijing. I feel like as a social movement, there's a lot of really important work happening outside of the government here in China. But I also think that a lot of the coordination happens through formal mechanisms here. So that's something to really keep in mind, and maybe invite Chinese leadership on this in order to have a strong Chinese presence in that, in the overall flyway, the data that's gathered at the flyway level. Yeah.
Thank you, Francis. Really appreciate. Not sure Tej wants to respond, but we definitely welcome everyone in the flyway to work together. I'm sure that partnership EAP has a strong participation from China as well. So we definitely want everyone to be part of this conservation process. So,
David, if I can,
yes,
David,
please,
if I can
thanks.
just thank Francis for that question. It's a point. It's a very relevant one, and it's going to be something that we need to resolve sooner rather than later. And perhaps it's one of the points that we can discuss further in the breakout session that you're planning after the next two presentations.
Sure. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Tex. Yep. So don't go away. We will have a breakout discussion to further the comments and the issues we are concerned about. But we still have two more speakers. They will bring us very exciting information. Our third speaker is Mr. Takehiko Shimizu, who is currently undertaking a PhD study on shorebird issue in Hokkaido University. He will be presenting shorebird monitoring in Japan, findings and future outlooks. Mr. Takehiko, please. Thank you.
Yes. Can you see my slide? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, hello everyone. My name is Takehiko Shimizu from the Graduate School of Environment Science in Hokkaido University. So firstly, thank you for having me here today. I'm so glad and really nervous because I'm standing as presenter with great persons, but I have a short history of research using monitoring data. I will explain the current status of monitoring surveys and results in Japan and the future outlook for research and monitoring surveys. So this is the outline of today's presentation. I start from the introduction of current monitoring system in Japan and its result. But perhaps those results are very famous and already known by many people. So in the third part, I show some suggestive studies. These research are good example benefiting from monitoring surveys. After that, I present future outlook and issues relating to both research and the monitoring system itself. So firstly, I introduced the current monitoring systems in Japan. So in Japan, one systematic monitoring survey is existing called the Monitoring Site 1000. This survey started from 2003 and is organized by the Ministry of the Environment. Even before 2003, there are several monitoring research, but from 2003, national survey systems are established and comprehensively managed. So Monitoring Site 1000 conduct periodic surveys in 8 ecosystems, and among them, coastal further classified into 5 surveys, and Shorebird is one of the okay. And the Shorebird monitoring survey include 160 monitoring sites, and the survey periods are 3, spring, autumn, and the winter. And the surveyors are regional volunteers, birders proficient as shorebirds. So they count shorebirds by each species. So this slide shows the spatial distribution of monitoring sites. So monitoring sites are existing across Japan, and each site has predetermined survey range indicated by orange polygons like this. So next, I show the fundamental result of monitoring survey in Japan. So firstly, I show the dominant species for each season observed in Monitoring Site 1000. So although 74 species were observed in Japan, dominant species was relatively consistent between seasons. So for example, in spring, the most observed species was darwin, followed by red-necked stint and gray-tailed tattler. And in autumn, red-necked stint was the most, followed by gray-tailed tattler and the sandring. And in winter, Downring was the most abundant wintering species in Japan, followed by Kentish bluebird and the gray bluebird. So next, I show the spatial distribution of shorebirds' abundance and the species richness in Japan. So fundamentally, shorebirds are observed across overall Japanese coastlines, and some individuals were also observed in inland zones. However, sites showing high abundance and species richness are also consistent between the indices and the seasons. That means there are Tokyo Bay, Nagoya Bay, and Ariake Bay were relatively higher. And additionally, in our spring and autumn migrating seasons, northeastern part of Japan called Hokkaido show high abundant species richness. So these regions are important stopovers. And then finally, the regional differences in species richness was not larger than ones in abundance. So this means that even many species depend on broad areas across Japan in migration, despite small individuals. So next, I show you the population trend of overall shorebirds in Japan. So you can see that all seasons show a decreasing trend from 2000, even though habitat areas are actually relatively steady in this period. Also, for dominant species, Darwin, redneck stint, gray-tailed tattler, and the Kentish bluebird show similar decreasing trend. In the recent decade, the decline rate seems more rapidly than before. Therefore, we should continue to conserve habitats and shorebirds in Japan and the other important stopover and the non-breeding site outside of Japan. So until now, I'm talking about the fundamental shorebird population and its changes in Japan. Then I show you some researches based on monitoring data. These include seminal and the latest ones. So before the concrete explanation, I show overall histories around the monitoring survey. And the research using shorebird's monitoring data was increasing in the 2010s. In this period, shorebird's decline trend was described in many regions in the East Asian Observation Flyway. After that, new issues rise. So for example, what factors drive the population decline of shorebirds? Or another question is what factors can explain regional or interspecific differences in population trend? So in other words, previous work answered the question whether the population trend is increasing or not, or decreasing. And the next step is to seek why the trend decline happened. So for example, even in Japan, some sites experience increasing trend, but some show decreasing trend. However, those regional differences in population trend cannot be explained yet. So not only for shorebird species, but also actually other species in the world. So nevertheless, for interspecific differences in population change, partial knowledge was accumulated by several seminal work. These studies integrated monitoring data with functional trait data. So functional trait data mean the species rating data, such as body information, like body mass and body size, but also habitat trait items, and so on. So these work have found important results. So I explained the 4 important results. So firstly, larger shorebirds decrease more rapidly than the smaller species. Secondly, specialist species decrease more than generalist species. In this research, the distinction of the specialist and the generalist was based on whether the species frequently use artificial habitats. And the thirdly, this is the most famous knowledge, but the species relying on the EROC decrease rapidly. And finally, species depending on rice fields more decrease in Japan. So like this, we have some partial knowledge on the interspecific differences in trend, but it is still on discussion, and we should understand it more comprehensively and integratedly. Next, I explain the regional differences in population change. But actually, the knowledge on this hardly accumulate now. To understand it, typical way is to combine monitoring data, shorebirds monitoring data, with the environmental data, such as habitat areas and the aerial change based on satellite data. Although many research has found the past and the current area of tidal wetland, there are few work to integrate shorebirds monitoring data with those area information. Additionally, if any, the results do not show clear relationship between habitat change and the shorebird change. So for example, firstly, indeed, there is a clear positive relationship between the habitat size and the shorebird's abundance and the species richness. So this means the larger wetland have more shorebirds than species. However, we and another research show that wetland change cannot explain the regional differences in shorebird population trends. So this reason may be explained by 4 factors. So firstly, maybe the minor wetland change below a certain threshold may have a little effect. So to solve this, we need to gather more we need to gather more sampling sites having a gradient habitat loss. And the secondary, historical habitat change may affect current communities as time lag effect. Because shorebirds do not respond to the habitat loss instantly, the further study need to understand how and how long historical wetland change influence present populations. In addition to the temporal factors, we may need to consider spatial factors, movement between adjacent sites. So because shorebirds inherently have high flying ability, so they can move between sites. So this movement would prevent from understanding the effect of habitat loss in a single site. So for example, Even though one site experiences habitat loss, if another adjacent site experiences greater habitat loss, the former site gets shorebird population from the latter site, despite wetland loss. And finally, because those kind of research deal with more than two trend or change result, in this case, the habitat change and the shorebird trend. So that the error of estimates and their combinations happen more easily. So therefore, we should understand how vulnerable those kind of research are to the errors. So considering the proposed issues, now I show future outlook for research using monitoring data. So in the first place, the issues I said before are common issues actually in ecological and conservation studies. The IPBES report said that there are 5 direct drivers causing biodiversity loss. That is land sea use change, direct exploitation, climate change, pollution, and the invasive alien species. Nevertheless, few studies consider multiple factors simultaneously in the broad extent, such as shorebird flyways. I acknowledge that untangling the complex factors behind the shorebird population decline is extremely difficult. However, this topic is one of the most important unsolved issues. To achieve this, we should deal with the following 3 points. So firstly, we should develop methods of causal inference using multiple time series data, both of shorebirds and the environmental data, with the consideration of time lag effect. Secondly, we should develop method to identify the site-specific effect in the whole flyway, with considering the spatial migration and the movement between sites. And finally, to address the previous 2 points, we require further useful and the data integration methods. So for the last part, I show you some examples of useful datasets in addition to current monitoring data. So first one is fundamental ecological data relating to shorebirds, such as survival and breeding data, migration route, home range, and prey items. This type of data tend to gather locally and nationally, but compiling the information is very important to assure enough amount of data for analysis. So secondly, we should collect biotic and abiotic data influencing shorebird population change. In this case, we should consider the prior 5 direct drivers and what kind of data can represent those factors. So land or sea use change and the climate change data are largely represented by satellite data, but the pollution, overexploitation, and the invasive species data covering the same extent with shorebird monitoring survey is still lacking. And thirdly, previous research analyzed the shorebird population changes, focusing on limited regions due to limited accessibility of data. However, to understand the population dynamics and its rating environmental factors of long-distance migratory species, we should use data in breeding, stopover, and non-breeding site. And finally, we should examine historical data or historical estimation of shorebirds and the environment. In these, shorebirds is still decreasing, but the decline rate is also large in the past age, like 1960s and 1980s. So utilizing these the data in the period can connect to detect decline causes. So finally, I'm talking about the issues of current monitoring systems, but this is not research. So monitoring survey have greatly contributed to the past and the current conservation. However, there are several points to be reviewed. So firstly, we should think how to sustain the current monitoring system at least. So for example, in Japan, urbanization and the highly aged societies likely reduce volunteer surveyors of the monitorings. So this problem has already happened, and some sites halt the annual survey due to lack of regional bird watchers. So surveyors should be taken over by younger generation gradually. Secondly, we should increase the resolution of monitoring data. So previous monitoring surveys tend to record abundance for each shorebird species. In addition to it, monitoring survey should try to record habitat type, including artificial habitat, behaviors in them, and age data if possible. This data can expand the range of analysis. And thirdly, so this is not directly related to today's presentation, but nocturnal monitoring is also important and should be developed. So several previous research partly described the shorebirds' behaviors and habitat use patterns are different between daytime and nighttime. Nevertheless, the research and data on nighttime are still lacking. Accumulating nighttime records can connect to understanding night-specific risks or benefit for shorebirds. So this is a summary of the presentation. I talked about not only fundamental explanation of result of monitoring survey in Japan, but also future outlook on the issues of monitoring survey and this research. The most important message is 4 points. Firstly, citizen-based monitoring surveys have been contributing to understanding shorebirds population change in many regions, including Japan. Secondly, even though shorebirds population trends are specified and decreasing, the knowledge on the factors explaining the regional and the interspecific differences in population trend is still lacking. And thirdly, considering these issues, future studies should develop the models and dataset to detect causal relationship between environment changes and the shorebird population changes. And finally, for further research and conservation, we should try to sustain and develop the current monitoring systems. So I got many support for this presentation. I express gratitude to the person. Thank you very much. And also thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Takahiko. Really appreciate for the results shared from monitoring in Japan. I think it's one of the best shorebird monitoring program in the flyway. So may we now invite 1 or 2 comments? Okay, we have 1 comment, 1 person raise hand. Andrea, please.
Oh, hello, thank you very much. Takahiko, that was a really wonderful talk. It's great to see you. I visited you in Hokkaido, you might remember. Anyhow, I had a question about, I really enjoyed your slide to show the different influences, and you had 1 slide where you showed 3 wetlands, and you had 1 of the wetlands shut down and the birds moving to another site, and that creating a problem of interpretation. And so my question is, I think local scale studies still have something to contribute to our understanding. It's not only a global approach. And why do I say that? Because I think that if we understand that wetlands disappearing here cause the birds to disappear, even if they're increasing at another site, I agree that when you look at it top down, it doesn't tell you everything because they're going down here and up here, but it still tells you that they're responding to that environmental variable of the wetland, disappearing or appearing, and that you can study at the local level. So it seems to me that local level studies have something to contribute, and that yes, aggregation at the flyway level and very high global levels are important to study global populations, but I think local level studies have important contributions to make in terms of us understanding the mechanisms and the environmental variables to which birds are responding dynamically. Could you comment?
Thank you very much. Very important and comment. Yeah, I totally agree with your comment. So local scale research is very important because the actual conservation is conducted in that local scales. therefore, the studying the local something like habitat or shorebird populations change is the most important point, most important for the local conservation actors. But on the other hand, the shorebirds are, the long distance migratory species. So the conserving only one site is, I think, is not meaningful. So to conserve the shorebird species, conserving the total flyway is the most important. So, but to understand the point, understanding the dynamics between the region or site is very important. So therefore, in terms of the two perspective, one is a local scale, but the other one is a global scale. So the future studies or future conservation should be considered these two scales, local, regional, and the global, I think.
Thank you very much. So if no further comments, maybe we can move on to the next speaker. So thank you very much again, Mr. Takehiko. Okay, so our last speaker for today's webinar is Mr. Chris Hassel and Ms. Catherine Leong. So they are doing a joint presentation. They were both from the Global Flyway Network. They both dedicated for shorebird. They are both dedicated shorebird conservationists for many years, which I knew them. They are also the core team member for the East Asian Australasian Shorebird Working Group. So without further ado, let's now welcome them to present the basics on monitoring of marked shorebird in the East Asian and Australasian flyways. Thank you. Chris, please.
Thank you, David. Did I put you, David, down the right-hand side? Can you go back to the top? Was that me?
Your presentation is perfect. Just carry on.
Okay, so on my screen, you're all down the side and I can't see the whole slide.
So you are unable to see the slide yourself?
I can't see the whole slide because the images of you and me and Andrea at the moment are down the right-hand side. No, I've hidden it. Forget it. We're good.
Okay,
all right.
Thank you. Please carry on.
Sorry, folks. Thank you for the invitation, David, and to the East Asian Australasian Flyway Partnership. Those talks we've seen earlier with big questions and planning and data all rely on the field work. They rely and require the field work, and I'm going to talk just about one aspect of the field work today. That's about marked birds. The presentation is by both Catherine and myself, but I am going to make the presentation. Yeah, everybody knows this. For these, the smallest piece of field work to the biggest statistical analysis takes an enormous amount of people to get anything done. And I thank, in this case, particularly those people mentioned here. A brief history of the shorebird marking. In the 80s, that's in the shorebird marking in this flyway, the East Asian Australasian flyway. In the 80s, a metal band. In the 90s, flags, where a protocol was developed in the early 2000s. And then around 2003, some projects started using the engraved leg flags, ELFs, the engraved leg flags. And currently, there are more than 40 active banding sites throughout the flyway, which is fantastic and can cause some confusion. And so that's what quite a lot of this talk will be about, is recording and getting your sightings to the correct places. Now, everyone wants to catch shorebirds. We get that. It's exciting. It's an absolute joy to hold these birds in your hand, work with like-minded people. but it does need to mean something to science and conservation. All projects worldwide should attach a metal band, and then most projects add either an engraved leg flag or colour bands to be able to identify the individual in the field, down to the individual. It adds a lot to the project, to your project, to be able to identify birds to the individual level. But of course, there's cost implications with engraved flags and 4 colour bands, and there's also welfare issues for the birds, extended handling times, etc. If you are starting a project, please remember to follow the protocol, the East Asian Australasian Flyway Flagging Protocol, and consider the Central Asian Flyway as well. You need good communication, and coordination is vital before you start banding birds. Remember to use the flag colours designated to your site. A new updated protocol is being prepared at the moment, and if you have any questions regarding that, please go directly to Catherine Lung, the co-presenter of this presentation. So, flag sightings can help conserve shorebirds. We don't just want to ban them for the science, we want to try and conserve them. That is the big challenge, but there's a number of ways that mark resighting projects can assist and help towards the conservation of shorebirds. So only colour mark your birds if they will be seen and reported by observers. So who is going to resight your birds? One issue with resighting data is that birds resighted is biased. It's biased very strongly towards the reciters are. So it really has some limitations, and that's one of the reasons that satellite tagging has come into being. Then it's not biased to where the observers are to see your bird. You can follow your bird all the time, but very expensive, and even further welfare issues with putting trackers onto birds. So these things all need to be into account. But if you do put a tracker on a bird, still individually marked, because it's back of function, you still can see resight the bird again, and still that will help with analysis and the issue of the survival of birds, the birds that are carrying trackers. So it does seem either you need to go and see to hope that other people are going to see them, to build that into your initial planning of your project. And also, even if you're banding at your site, it's extremely helpful to resight birds at your site as well. You'll potentially find more out from resighting birds at your site than you will from banding them at your site. And it'll certainly help inform the role of your site throughout the flyway. Okay, so let's get to the actual resightings of the birds. If you have a pair of binoculars, you can see that you have a flag in front of you. If you have a telescope, then you can actually read the individual flag or multiple colour bands that is there in front of you. If you're going to do resightings, knowing your local site is critical, knowing how the tides work, knowing where the birds roost, the different habitats they have, roosting habitats, and indeed the habits of the birds. And knowing your site is really, really critical. The position of the metal band shouldn't matter when you resight a bird. that is usually, well, almost always not part of the combination. So you don't need to record where the metal is. If you can't read the code, and I'll show later that that can quite often be the case, still record the color, still record the species, etc. So we do get some information. Now, the other thing you can do, apart from a telescope or a pair of binoculars, is you can get a camera. On a serious note, many sightings come from photographers. Often they're not shorebirders, and they're not even always birders, but they're a very useful resource. And my plea, my demand to you is to reply to these people. If you send them a nice story, a nice information about the bird that they have seen, they will keep sending you images. They'll go out and look for marked birds to send to you, and it will really strengthen your project. And it's polite to reply to people as well. This is sort of a personal plea. If you get a record as an individual, it's certainly you'll put it into your database, and hopefully it'll make it into all those databases and plans we've been talking about. But as an individual, if you get an individual person who's marked a bird and you get a sighting, reply to the person. And if you are a dedicated photographer, you'll soon be very popular with banders. Images are fantastic for marking project. They're confirmation of the sighting if the observer is inexperienced, and they're great for public outreach, and indeed great for presentations. It's entirely up to the individual observer how they record the sighting. Just make sure all the relevant information you need is there. The date, the name of the site, the GPS, the time, etc. If I expect to collect a lot of sightings and I'm sitting down on the cliff top of Roebuck Bay, then I will use a dedicated data sheet. If I'm at a site where I don't expect to collect so much, or I know I'm going to be on the move, walking along, managing a telescope and a notebook, etc., then I will just jot things down in a notebook. You can put the records directly into your phone or into dedicated handheld devices. So any way that you can get those sightings from your site recorded accurately. And then the important thing for you, the observer, is to get your data to the person who marked the bird by any means possible. And there are many ways to do that, which I will go on to in a slide or two. So there's a lot to record when you see a bird. Hopefully it'll be simple, the species and the code, but all sorts of things happen. Upside down flags, flags that have slipped over leg joints, faded flags, faded ink, limping birds, all sorts of things. So record as much as you're able to assist the person who put the band on. And you should be aware of some problems. This is both for people who are going to band the birds and people who are going to see the birds. But it seems very obvious, but record honestly what you see. Some of the problems there are clearly obvious. You know, when you've got an X or a K and the bird's at distance and the flag's at a slightly kinked angle, it can be very difficult to see. So basically, we want the correct information. I would rather have one correct record than 100 incorrect ones. Seriously, it's no point. But things can be difficult if you haven't put the best font when you had your flags done, or you've got M's and N's and W's and M's and V's and W's all put together. It really can be a challenge. So be careful and be honest with what you're recording. And for those of you who are banding birds, if you're going to put on a few hundred flags in your study, or maybe low thousands, you may be able to pick and choose the best codes. But if you're going to put on thousands and thousands of records, you probably have to use all the tricky codes as well. So here in the flyway, our flyway, there are various ways to get your recitings to the bander. Most of these groups have a Facebook page, individual emails, and they have dedicated websites. So there's plenty of ways to get your recitings back to the bander and eventually into the big data sets. Yeah, any of those, I hope I've covered them all. I may not have done, but they are some of the main ones currently in our flyway. Now, I don't want to bang on, but now and again I do bang on. This is just so important. My apologies. We've talked about getting the sightings. They go into a big database, and eventually the big database will hopefully be analysed, and a snazzy paper will come out with statistics and modelling and all sorts of things. But in the first instance, if you've marked a bird and somebody sees it, you need to reply to them as soon as possible and give them some information. It is up to you how much information you give them, but you really should get back to them. Something I try to do with GFN recitings is get back to people very quickly, and I give them a full life history. It's a quick reply. It's a great way to draw people into the life of a particular bird and get them to keep looking and sending in recitings. If you take weeks to reply, or you don't reply at all, which in my view is unforgivable, reciters will drift away. They won't send you any more pictures, and you will miss out on a great deal of data for your study. And reciters, please send in repeat sightings. We don't mind if you see a bird day after day after day. Don't just send it, let's say you see it in the spring migration season, see it on the 3rd of May, and you see it on the 5th and the 9th and the 12th. Please send in every record. They all help. So the hard scientific data will come as we build up these databases, but the good news stories can start the minute you start getting recitings. These are quite obvious examples here. This bird was found alive in a fishing net and released, and as you can see down the bottom, 4 years later, at least 4 years later, we know that bird was still alive and well and being seen. So that really needs to be communicated back to in this case, Xiaodong Zhang, who found the bird and saved it and released it. Another example is that you might band a bird and never see it at your site again, but it might get seen somewhere else. In this case, Lux, a Pteric sandpiper banded here in Northwest Australia, never seen again here, but I've got 98 recitings of it, 96 from one observer, over 6 spring migration seasons in South Korea. And it was photographed on most days it was seen. So thanks to Andreas. Andreas would send me a record every day, and I didn't reply to him every day. I always said, thanks, got the sighting, and then I'd send him a summary at the end of every season. But all it was his record. So thanks to Andreas Kim for that. Super data. The accurate arrival times and departure times for a Pteric from Northwest Australia passing through Korea. Quick moves between sites are not rare in migratory birds, obviously. We all know about that. We might have watched them on satellite tracking and just knowledge that we know. But to record them without the aid of trackers is relatively rare. I have a few examples in my data set, and this is just one example. So you can see the dates in 2021. I saw it on the 20th of April, and then it was seen and photographed on the 24th up in Taiwan. This individual bird has had a total of 156 resightings, and you can see that it was alive and well a week ago. Birds are a really nice way, or resightings of marked birds are a nice way to connect sites, but they also connect people. The information from this bird I've disseminated to all the observers, all in one group, so they all know who's seen the bird, etc. This bird was banded in Broome. It's been seen in Sumatra. It's been seen in 2 provinces in China, 400 kilometers apart, just in one day. Down there in the green box, you can see that. So you can see the first is seen banded here in Roebuck Bay on one of my regular roost sites where I view the birds and catch the birds. Then it moved up to Indonesia, was seen again in Indonesia. Then it moved back here. That's most unusual. That's not what we think we know about shorebirds. We think adult shorebirds, once they've settled in a non-breeding destination, tend to stay there. But that bird came back to visit us, and then was seen on southward migration in 21, and then in China. So you can build up very nice, simple pictures of the migration of birds just from marking them. And all this is a way to draw in people and give good news, quick good news stories out there, not wait for years and years for the publications to come out. I think, I may not be 100% accurate, but I think this is the oldest migrant we have in our AWS-G and GFN data sets. Lived to at least the grand old age of 33 plus, which in the Australian system is 33 years or older, so a minimum of 33. You'll notice the 10-year gap between resightings down there. This is due to the fact that the flag had faded, the ink had faded from the flag. So that's another factor to consider when you design your study. Where will you get your flags from? You can make them yourselves. It's time consuming and difficult to access the material, but you can do them yourselves. Or you can get them made professionally, but do remember the quality is not always perfect. Luckily in Roebuck Bay, we're super close, and in the evening, the evening sunlight literally shines through the flag. And even though there's no ink at all, they're very easy to read. But that's very rare to be lucky to get those conditions. So remember that public outreach is vital. You just talk to people, tell them these stories, do presentations at your local birding clubs or your scout group or anything like that. Let people know what's going on with birds in their area. This is quite a boring slide, but if you imagine sending this information to someone who could be younger than the bird, someone who's seen the bird or photographed the bird, and they could easily be younger than the bird. So that would be pretty exciting for someone to get. You can see they're banded way back in 1994, recaptured and given the engraved leg flag in 2017. I had 34 sightings of it since then. You can see that I've seen it in April when I think it's going to migrate, and I saw it indeed this year in April when I thought it was going to migrate. So it's been 29 years and 50 weeks since it was banded to the last resighting. And we wish it good luck and happy 33rd birthday on the breeding grounds later this year. In Australia, we give the birds their birthday on the 1st of August. So last but one slide. So let me indulge in a bit of emotion. I'm an emotional fella. I truly love these birds. And Jeb, I considered to be a close friend of mine. We saw each other often in Roebuck Bay and in Bohai Bay. Jeb lived till he was at least 22 years old, was banded and flagged with a plain flag in 2000, aged 1, so within his first year of life. He was caught again in 2006 and given an engraved leg flag. That caught again in March 2012, flag had worn away, the ink had worn away. So he's been in the net 3 times. I don't know if it was in my hand every time, but he's been in my hand. And then we saw him in Bohai Bay when we did our work in China, every year on the same small area of the mudflat for 10 years, each and every year from 2012 to 2021. And his last resight was on the 17th of May, 2021. I'd be very confident he'd been there every year since he became a migrating adult. So he was banded in 2000, so maybe in 2002 or 2003, he would have been every year on that little patch of mudflat. Who knows, maybe he recognised me when I was sitting on the cliff of Roebuck Bay, or maybe he recognised me on the seawall at Bohai. Now, I realise that stories like the last one are, for me, for emotional people, they probably don't win over politicians and big business. So indeed, scientific papers are a highly desirable outcome from any studies. Note down in the right-hand side, you can combine resightings and satellite tracking work together. And this is really just an absolute fraction of the output from GFN and a fraction of the output from all the work that is done by all of you and all of the studies throughout the flyway. So I wish you good luck with your studies. Thank you for listening, and thank you to the Flyway Partnership for the invitation to talk. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Chris. We highly appreciate for the very informative presentation. Monitoring color flag bird or marked bird are equivalently important for monitoring the shorebird population. So may I see if there's any comments or any questions from the floor, please? Any hand raised? Okay. Oh, yeah. Richard, please.
Thank you very much, Chris. Tom and I very much enjoyed your presentation. I noticed that, with birds living 30 years, and I guess many projects, GFM perhaps accepted, many projects being shorter than that, do you have recommendations for what projects staff should do to make sure their records kind of live on and are accessible, to other projects coming after them, if you understand what I mean? Is there a clear place to lodge that kind of resighting history that one has built up during a project? Or do you just choose one of the sources that you talked about?
Yeah, this goes back to your point, and also that Ty was making, was trying to have a single place. Marcel Claassen at Deakin University is really working towards that with Birdmark, which is one of the sites I showed there. You can put your sighting into Birdmark and get an immediate output if you have access to it. So that's certainly one way to do it. My plea is for individual banders not to forget, not to assume that people are going to find somewhere else to lodge it, and therefore they need to lodge it. But yes, it's a tricky one. So a student does a 3-year PhD, marks the birds, gets the information, and then where that's going to go. they need to encourage people who have engaged with them during the course of their project to, yes, indeed, to send those to any of those sites that are on the database, and hopefully liaison between all of us will get them into currently, hopefully, into Birdmark.
Great. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, I think because we are planning a discussion, so I knew the presentation are wonderful and there's more questions, but I thought we can discuss further. Take this opportunity. There's a large audience of enthusiastic shorebird lovers. So basically, the plan is, if you don't mind, we drag on this event a little longer with so much resource person we have today. So I thought we could start a discussion on status of difficulties faced in shorebird monitoring in your country or in your wetland or in your region. And anyhow, what's the suggestion to improvement? So basically, Professor Fuller and Dr. Munko has some already solution recommendation in their slide, but I think we can just, repeat some of the important issue we should be looking into. There's no commitment how we're going to address it and take on, but definitely I think this thought can be gathered and to look into if we are going to do any setup or any activity or what we can do to follow up. So my suggestion is we'll soon have a breakout room session from this program. Then we can have four rooms, one on Northeast Asia, one on Southeast Asia, one on Australasia, and last one maybe breeding range. Some room maybe have less people, or some room maybe have more people. So probably we can have half an hour discussion, if that's okay to people. So let me see how many people still. So we still have 68 people in the list, so that's great. So if people are okay, I would suggest Northeast Asia, if Catherine around or Ife around, so you can help to gather some discussion. Can I hear from you? For Southeast Asia. Okay. Great. I just wonder some people left or not. So Southeast Asia, myself, maybe Philip around. So anyway, I'm around. So Australasia, is Chris still around, and Mitya?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. Just want some people to be, coordinating. So breeding range, I see Rick was around. So, and Dimitri, are you guys around?
Hi.
Okay, Dimitri is around. So there may be less people in your group, but you do whatever. But if no one, then you can report what your source is. So in a half an hour time, now it's 4 o'clock. So we start a breakout room session now. Then in half an hour, the breakout room will be closed. So we'll come back and do a very short catch up on the summary your group discussed. Then we can, end the day. Thank you very much. Any last minute thought or suggestion or comment? If no, we are going to the breakout room. Are you Pressing a breakout room?
We have hand raised, David.
Yes. Are you breaking up?
Hi, David. Hello.
Oh,
Can I have a minute for a question? Thank you very much for this amazing series of talks. Actually, so based on last presentation by Chris Hassel, I'd like to raise a question. Maybe somebody from the Central Asian Flyway, probably Dr. Tej Munkar, will be able to answer. Do we have, to the best of my knowledge, we don't have such a Shorebird reciting information platform, a web-based platform to report the flag resightings. So do we have those? Do we have such a platform? Or if not, is there any possibility to develop one for the Central Asian Flyway in the near future?
okay, Ted, I hope Ted is still around. So, but anyway, there, I noticed that a lot of participants from South Asia region, and of course, Shorebird in South Asia are equivalently important. This region, so the EAP doesn't covers the area as for now. So, but we can always discuss. You know, you can always participate in the discussion we have. As for now.
David?
Yes, Chris, please.
The place to go to, is to the Bomber Natural History Society, and also try and get Madhumita. Madhumita she was on earlier. She is the best, as I'm aware, currently the best contact in India. She knows all the banders. I don't know that she still works for BNHS, but she is your best contact.
Okay.
She's definitely your best contact.
So we should be thinking of developing such a platform for our flyers as well. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Or get in contact with Marcel at Birdmark and see if he'd like to include the CAF in there.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We'll do it.
Thanks, Chris. Shall we now let's go to the breakout room?
David, I'm sorry, I have to leave the meeting. I've got to go back to the Ramsar conference.
They choose their own room. Good, sorry. Hi, Ted. Yes, sorry. We were just a bit of mixed up with a break room and then now some comments. Yes, carry on.
Just to mention that I've really enjoyed participating in the webinar, but I'll need to leave because they are rescheduling the sessions at the Ramsar Standing Committee, and I'll need to go across to discuss about the population estimates there. So I'm sorry, I'll have to jump out of the meeting now. I hope that's okay. But happy to follow up with everyone. And also on the point that Gayamini raised, I think there could be some opportunities to try and work with other researchers to find a way forward within the Central Asian Flyway. What we are learning clearly is that some species don't follow the flyway definitions, fortunately, such as the curlew sandpiper, which is in both the Central Asian Flyway and the East Asian Australasian Flyway. And so if there is a good mechanism, as Chris mentioned, that is being developed for the East Asian Australasian Flyway, if that in some way could be extended to the Central Asian Flyway, at least until something separate is developed for the Central Asian Flyway. That's one important way to make sure that none of the observations and reporting that is happening in the Central Asian Flyway is being lost, because these could well be from some of the birds that are being marked in the East Asian Australasian Flyway as well. So I hope, as Chris mentioned, we could find a way to ensure that at least in the short term, no observations are being lost, because nothing puts off people if they don't get a response or they don't know where to submit an observation that they are spending hours sometimes to take a good photograph of. So let's find a way to get these important observations in. Thank you.
And
thanks a lot, Ted. Yes, carry on.
sorry, it goes even further. There's birds from the Middle East that come through India and indeed through China, and the great knots and breed in far northeast.
Yes,
So
yes.
there is a lot to consider. A lot to consider.
Absolutely. Okay.
Thanks a lot, Ted. I think this can be an ongoing discussion. So we wait for your further update. So maybe let's now move on to the breakout room, please. Thank you.
Hi, we there?
Hi, Phil. Yes.
Hi, David. Hi.
Yeah, we have few people here. So in
Okay.
our group, yeah. I think people are still just trying to find a room.
Yeah, you had me worried when you talked about breakout rooms. I've not come across that before, but I saw the icon at the edge of my screen and pressed how it works. Good. Yeah.
Hey, let's see how many people we have. We have a few people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We might have 10 people.
All right. Right.
We have 8 people for now, so there's still 18 people on sign. Maybe they don't know what they do. So we, anyway, we have 10 people now. So 11. Increasing. Okay, I think the thanks a lot. I think we can move on to some discussion. Take this opportunity. There are so many conservationists around, so maybe we could do a round introduction if everyone don't mind. So maybe I can invite people from my screen from left to right. Immediately beside me on my screen, I can see Mingala Lei.
Yes, Mingala Lee. Yes, from Myanmar.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Maybe you want to share, where you're from and what kind of monitoring you guys are doing, if there's any difficulty you are facing, and then, what suggestion for improvement.
So I don't have for sharing, just only participating and hearing the other data. Yes, I'm just very new here. Yes.
Sorry, can you say again?
I have nothing to share. I'm just only hearing, listening here. I'm just very new. Yes.
Okay, fine. Nice to meet you. Good to have Shorebird lover and new joiner. Wonderful. Thank you. You're welcome. So now immediately next is Phil rounds. Hi, Phil. Maybe you can share more.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to meet you, my fellow birders in Southeast Asia. I'm these days still affiliated with Mahidol University, although nominally retired. I've been resident in Thailand for over 40 years. And I used to be the coordinator for AWC in Thailand, and participated and led the first AWC midwinter count in Thailand back in 1987, and continued until into the 2000s, but I've stepped down now as coordinator. So I think most of the counting is done by younger people now, Bird Conservation Society of Thailand, and by Department of National Parks staff who do quite a lot of work. I'm basically would describe myself now in terms of my shorebird activities as an occasional wader bander, and I catch and flag waders. Nothing like as many as the Department of National Parks in Thailand do, but I still continue doing that. I'm less involved with counting these days, leaving it more to younger and more active and enthusiastic folks. But I'm still aware there's a lot of data in Thailand, and I'm not sure how much of it is shared and how much of it is lost in the BCST, in Bird Conservation Society of Thailand, which is the BirdLife partner. So I think we have a lot of work to do in terms of collating existing data on counts of shorebirds in Thailand. I think in general we could say that shorebird coverage is quite good in Thailand, reasonably good, but the data may not necessarily be shared. Sorry, I've run over merely introducing myself and got ahead of myself, so I'll make way for the next person. Thank you, David.
Thank you. So I understand you are saying that data sharing is some sort of issue in Thailand, right?
I think the data, there's quite a lot of data, but I'm not sure it needs work to kind of pull it out of the recesses. I'm not sure how, for example, how well AWC is working now in Thailand. It used to work quite well, but I'm not so sure now. I'm no longer the coordinator, and I hope that the BirdLife partner, BCST, is undertaking that, but I'm not sure how well that's going. And I haven't been in touch with Tage or with Tom Langdon recently about this.
Thank you. We'll try to link with them. If they are here, then they can share. If not, we will get back. So on my immediately next is Freesia C. Hi, Freesia. Would you mind to share some thoughts on the monitoring work, shorebird monitoring work that you are involved? Freesia C. Sao Yi. Are you hearing me? Okay, that's a message. Okay, thank you. You can help to join Sungai Buloh bird sensors. There's some monitoring work carrying on, and we need volunteer. Okay, on my screen next is Jess Marine. Is there anything you want to share about shorebird monitoring work that you are involved?
Hi, I'm Yasmin Meren. I'm from the Philippines, and I am an active volunteer during the waterbird census since I think 2009. And currently I'm working on shorebird monitoring, and we do this usually monthly during migratory season. And one of the challenges that we have is we're kind of looking at the habitat use of shorebirds or migratory birds, but how do you do nocturnal monitoring? I mean, I've seen it in one of the slides, but how do you do it? Because I don't know if using a night vision camera can individually identify birds. Is that possible for nocturnal monitoring? How do you do it for those who have experience?
I trying to understand, are you talking about shorebird monitoring? Is there any reason you must do it in the night?
Yeah, I mean, is there a possible way of checking which species are seen on a specific site during the night? Because we know where they are during the day, and there are locals who say that some of these shorebirds are, roosting or actively feeding in their sites at night. But we don't know how to we don't know how to count them. We don't know how to identify them during the night. How do you guys do it? I mean, do you have an experience?
I think no one can do survey in the night except catching them, which Phil has mentioned is a shorebird bander, which we doing it as well. So basically, but this need to be seriously trained. So basically, you know how to set up nets, handling the birds and bring them back, identify the species. Of course, it's very hard to count exactly how many by putting this net. So at least to have some birds caught. Yeah, but in general, shorebird monitoring is done in daytime, which is the situation you are referring are very unusual.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
just wondering if there is like a novel way to do it.
Yeah,
So, but
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on my screen next is Emilia Lai. Hello, Emilia.
Hi.
Yes, would you mind to share your experience in shorebird monitoring?
Yeah, hi. I'm based in Taiwan. And in Taiwan, I think the national monitoring system for shorebird is probably the Taiwan New Year bird count, which is done around the New Year, once a year. Yeah, and me personally, I do bird counts for like in Jianghua, which is on the west coast of Taiwan. For my own study or small monitoring project. Yeah,
Yes.
that's
What difficulty are you facing?
Like population trend is one of the difficulty, I think, to coordinate all the data and to do a long-term trend, and also to for like our content is like project based. So if the project is terminated or stopped in several years, and probably not all the studying site could be covered. Probably just part of the area could be covered in the projects if there's no long-term financial support.
Thank you. So basically, it's a project-based monitoring program, right?
Yeah, but yeah.
So just now, first the challenge you mentioned, I did not get it. So you were saying the difficulty in analyze the trend?
Yeah, long-term trend.
Okay, you mean lacking of skill or lacking of data?
Skill and data is another thing that I said. It's like project supported. So
yeah.
if
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So on my screen next is Usha Lachinpa. Usha, would you mind to share some of the work you're doing on shorebird monitoring? Thank you.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Usha. I used to work at the Bombay Natural History Society as a field biologist before moving to the Sikkim Himalayas in 1985, because of which then the Asian waterfowl count that started. I tried to visit the wetlands in Sikkim. It's a very small state, and I found it was not very easy because we have these highland wetlands which are very small, and most of the migratory birds, they, other than the lesser sand plover which we found breeding in North Sikkim, most of the birds overfly the state, and they may just the stopover sites. Our lakes are just stopover sites. So every time when the dates were announced for the AWCs, I used to try and cover a few wetlands, and I found that we had very few counts, maybe just 1 or 2 birds, or at maximum like 15. And the next day there would be maybe none, or other birds. So it was very difficult. So I had written to the BNHS saying that this was the difficulty. And so for the Himalayan states or Himalayan regions, the AWC dates were really inconvenient, because we could get probably better counts pre and post migration season, pre and post winter. So that was one of the reasons why slowly, we stopped doing really the counts, because it wasn't really adding as such to the database. And I attended a few meetings through the BNHS or wetland meetings, where Tej said that you have now a lot of records of birds overflying Sikkim, because of the satellite tags on them. So that was very interesting. But on ground, we don't get to really document the kind of bird numbers that are seen in the plains, in the Indo-Gangetic plains of the country. And before the AWC started, I was working at Bharatpur, the Keoladev National Park, for some time, where we used to ring hundreds and hundreds of birds, which the trappers used to catch in the night using their own traditional techniques. And that was very interesting. So I thought of repeating that in Sikkim, but I found that it's not the right season and we don't get the kind of birds. And in addition to this, there was another problem that most of the wetlands are on the international borders, because of which there are a lot of restrictions. So that was another reason why, and plus there are so many small wetlands, and travel being very difficult in the mountains, I couldn't really cover. And many other people after me, they're mostly birders, and like it was discussed earlier, photographers. So these days, I'm not doing any bird counts for the AWC, but sometimes I find that, social media, the photographers, they put up pictures, and sometimes only they get published. Otherwise, they probably get lost. They're very interesting records. So these are the difficulties I've been facing in the Himalayas. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you are in a very interesting area that, of course, monitoring work is very challenging. So yeah, so probably how to look at, if resources are limited, focus in a smaller area rather than a large scale to do some, work that you can manage. Thank you very much for sharing. Okay, on my screen next is a very Hasudum old friend, but I cannot spell your name correctly. Pronounce. Yeah, please.
Just call me Ferry, David. Hi, David. How are you? Can hear my...
Can hear you. Yeah, please carry on.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ferry. I'm from Indonesia. So currently I'm work as a freelance consultant for wetlands and biodiversity conservation. But also I am a voluntary work for the National Partnership for migratory bird conservations. This forum is led by the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. So I work for the monitoring and database task force. And also I still support the Asian waterbird census in Indonesia as a participant, and also support for data verifications with our colleagues in Wetland International Indonesia program. I think that's for now, David.
Yes, so what kind of difficulty in shorebird monitoring in Indonesia?
So the difficulties in Indonesia is most of shorebird is not part of our priority in biodiversity conservation issue. So yeah, most of the actually yeah, we in Indonesian works for the protected birds as a priority, but for shorebird, even some of the shorebird is protected, but we realize that in a site in our province, the governance unit or agency is not have a priority to do more effort for monitoring the shorebird. But for the case for the Ramsar sites such as Sembilang and Wasud, maybe they have a more attention because they are already signed as a private site network, as we know. But other site, maybe we still encourage the agency or local government to do better for the monitoring of the shorebird. Thank you.
Thank you. So does government agency normally have funding for shorebird monitoring, or
Not
ask
spe-
staff to do the work?
I think not specifically for the shorebird, but maybe the nomenclature is dealing with the wetland conservations or mangrove or coastal conservation effort, not specifically with we mentioned the shorebird.
Thank you. Thank you, Ferry. Appreciate for sharing.
Thank you.
On my screen next is Ali Kong Lung. Sorry if I pronounce your name wrongly. Hi, Ali. Would you mind to share what about your work on shorebird monitoring? Okay, as I'm getting silence, maybe I could jump to the next person. On my screen next is Dax Thimble. Would you mind to share your shorebird monitoring related experience and the difficulties you're facing?
Hi, hello. Okay.
Hi.
Can everybody hear me?
Hello, I can't hear you. Can you say again?
Hi, this is all new to me. I've only joined for the past 3 years the AWC here in the Philippines.
Oh, okay.
We have a small town here in Victoria, Tarlac, here in the Philippines. I'm also part of the provincial government, and we are trying to help the community in the recording of migratory birds here in a small part of the town. Unfortunately, the area does not have a beach. We only have wetlands, but we still do have migratory waders coming in every year.
Thank you. So what kind of difficulties you are facing in your monitoring work?
In the line of monitoring, I think we need more people to come in at different times of the at different times of the migration season. Like what Usha said, Ma'am Usha said, I think it's very important for us because it's a very small, it's only around 80 hectares. So when we do the annual bird count, which we do only either in the late January or early February, I think we are missing more species which are not being recorded along the other months during the migration season.
So more regularly monitoring program.
Yes.
Thank you. So on my screen next is Raju. Hello, Raju. How are you?
Hi, David. How are you? It's very long. We are not talking. Hi, everyone. Okay, I will start. My name is Ragil. I'm from Indonesia, from XI Foundation Indonesia, actually. And we are already working in shorebird, migratory shorebird, like since 2019, I think. And currently, we are still working in our surveys and bird pending, shorebird pending. Especially right now, we are actively doing a survey and shorebird pending in Borneo, Kalimantan, because last year we get a lot of information about satellite tracking from our friends, and it shows that a lot of individuals stop and using the shoreline in Kalimantan, in Borneo, but a lot of sites is unknown and never surveyed. And fortunately, we got like what can I say? We got chance to do a survey in one spot in central Kalimantan. The shoreline position is in the south, I think, yeah, in the south area of Kalimantan. And we get a lot of interesting results of shorebird there. So if for comparison, little that I can share because a limited time, in Sumatra, if we do a survey in like June or April, we will find no shorebird at all, like zero birds. It can be zero birds. But on Kalimantan, on the site we working right now, we still can find up to 300 or 400 individuals, including the endangered species such as Farisan curlew. We can see them in a flock around 50 or 60 individuals in April to June, I think. So it's a new thing for us, a new discovery for us, and we hope we will able to continue our work there. And for difficulties, Indonesia have a very large areas and a lot of shoreline in Indonesia, except in Java, are difficult to reach, not easy to reach, which cause needs of a lot of funds or budget to do a survey or program on each site. That's one difficulties. And other difficulties is knowledge gap. A lot of people are our college, even if they're working in conservation, their knowledge about migratory shorebird are not, I can say, little. Maybe it linked to the difficulties that Ferry shared before, that migratory shorebird is not yet a priority for conservation work in Indonesia, because Indonesia have very much endemic endangered species. So I think that's one of the cause why the migratory shorebird is not yet priority in Indonesia. And understanding, people knowledge, especially local people. So sometimes when we do a research or survey on the news sites, we found local people like do the hunting to migratory shorebird for food usually, because they don't know that that's important, that's endangered, etc., etc. I think there is still some other difficulties, but I think I need to stop so I can give the other time to share their difficulties and works. Thank you, David and all.
Thank you very much, Raju. So I think our group have more people and probably going to take very long if we finish the whole round. So we probably have to, go back to the main room so that we can end the session. But if any people want to add one last sharing, so please just let me know or raise your hand or just talk. Okay, thanks a lot for those who did not have an opportunity. Mingala Lee, yes, please.
Yes, David. So, I want to say a little bit. And the last, I involved in monitoring in Myanmar. Yes, I'm working at a Bangor Balai. So in Myanmar, we working at the site Garo of Modama, and very very huge area. And so we separate two part, and eastern part and western part. And for the western part, we don't go in every year, but in the eastern part, like a Mon region, we do every year. And the last year we do like SMAC patrolling, and yes, we do the monitoring and format about format in a migratory season, and we see many birds. And for the difficulty, we see like a hunting migratory shorebird. Yes.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. So sorry we don't have a chance for everyone to talk, but I just want to share, since we are here in 1 minute. Under this ASEAN Flyway Network project, we are doing a capacity building project this year. Unfortunately, we cannot sponsor everyone. Some people in each ASEAN country may be sponsored to be trained in a regional training workshop in Singapore. And then there will be national training workshop carried out in each country, one training workshop. I hope some of you can have the chance to participate some of these activities. So if you want to know more of the project, you can contact me after the event. So maybe let's now go back to the main room so we can, do sharing and report and close the session today. Thank you very much for your help, and we will go back to the main room now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks a lot for those stay on with us. So we are trying to end this session very soon, maybe in, definitely 10, 15 or 20 minutes maximum. So we appreciate for people stay this long and, join a breakout session to have a bit of this more discussion. So probably we will see how our future webinar. Today we had four speaker and trying to, took almost 2 hours, and then we probably did not have good discussion. Whether we should in the future focus on discussion, we will see. We'll look into this. So thank you very much for your stay on. You are the champion for future Shorebird monitoring. So maybe we will just invite people, if you had a discussion in your group, start with Northeast Asia. If anyone want to do a sharing, summarize the discussion and do a quick summary. Thank you.
I took some notes during our discussion. We have a small group of 4 people talking. So, but we cover a lot of all the aspects. So, for Northeast Asia, we have China, Japan, and Korea. So, China being a big part of this region, so we think that at the moment, a big issue in China is about data sharing and the data security issues. So we think that engaging the government earlier by all sorts of agreement, bilateral agreement, or city-sized partnerships, these kind of encouraging engagement might help smooth the process of data sharing later, and to secure good funding for supporting all the monitoring of the important sites within the countries. And we also share common issues in different countries, in China, in Japan, about the gaps of government level monitoring and community level monitoring. The data probably didn't quite go together at the moment. And also there are gaps that people who are working on monitoring is getting old, and there's not enough young people coming into the career because there's limited opportunity for them to get a paid job in this aspect of work. And we also touched on that there's little known about the inland shorebird sites, particularly in China. Around the inland side, there could be lots of shorebirds as well, like thousands of dunlins and also black-tailed godwits, which usually use the inland sites as well. And we also talk about trying to get all the tracking studies, findings, and also reciting stories can be good stories to engage local community and also government, so that they would be interested to support the monitoring and be part of the monitoring as well. And there's also a plan for some Chinese government officials from Yalujiang to visit New Zealand and Australia in near future. So hopefully there's one good start of engaging local government to support monitoring. That's all from our group.
Thank you very much, Catherine. So very helpful. So anyone want to add on to Catherine's report?
Just a short one to say that we've got the bilateral agreements with Australia, China, Korea, and Japan. So we've got a framework there, and sort of I will work at this end with the Australian government, and but trying to use that bilateral to raise some of these issues about sharing information and working together, and it's perhaps we can influence across those 4 countries more communication at the government level, happening there to facilitate researchers and citizen scientists to engage in this international effort for the conservation of migratory waterbirds.
Thank you very much, Doug. Good to see you. Looks great. So yeah, so I would hope our reporter could do a few word of writing, email me in case we did not capture your thoughts in detail, so we could just putting together a simple write up on this. Okay, next will be Southeast Asia. So that will be me. Okay, so we have almost 20 people in and out, so we did not even have a chance for everyone to speak. In the end, I have to close it. Otherwise, we may, come back in a half an hour. So yeah, data sharing is one of the issue, and we have people, that work on, that have difficulty in data analysis. Monitoring project basis may not sustain. So travel difficulties, wetlands are very big, or country are very big, or in the Himalaya areas, a lot of mountains. So particularly in Southeast Asia, shorebirds are low priority, so low awareness. Hunting are still ongoing. So a lot of new area, new findings, and require fund, expertise, and so on. So basically, we have ASEAN Flyway Network project focused on capacity building this year. But of course, there's no money to train everyone. There will be a regional training in Singapore and followed up by one national training in each country. We hope for some, contribution to be made related to waterbird conservation in the countries. So anyone in our group would want to add a little bit more? Yes, Doug, please.
I was waiting in case your team, the Southeast Asia, wanted to say something. One of the things that's happening with Asian Development Bank is its large investment in looking at the impact of climate change on coastal communities. So that's something where maybe an opportunity to link into the migratory waterbird story. And various Southeast Asian countries will be taking out significant loans about trying to better secure communities in the face of climate change impacts, particularly storm impacts, but there'll be broader impacts as our climate continues to change because of CO2 emissions. So that's something to keep in mind, that that Asian Development Bank will be funding that exercise, and in those coastal activities, we want to make sure that the right ecological outcomes are also happening. So that might be something that could be followed up and linked into what's happening with that investment stream that will come from ADB.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, we are aware of that, and we hope their funding can actually contribute to shorebird conservation. Okay, so Australasia, if anyone want to, just make a quick sharing on that, on the discussion.
I can do that. I've written down a couple of really key points, and then I could invite anyone else from our group to add if I've missed anything, if that's helpful.
Yes, please, Micha.
All right, so a couple of key points from our discussion. One thing was we felt that it's really important for there to be input from user groups of data, of monitoring data, to inform the monitoring protocols. So for example, that is people who work on data to generate trends, to generate population estimates or survival estimates, or even communications products. There's a lot of different end users of monitoring data. And I think it would be really helpful to have maybe a series of workshops where quite targeted user groups who have very specialized knowledge of actually using these data can provide some very practical and succinct advice that is turned into sort of guidance documents for informing monitoring protocols. So that was one point. That sort of led to a point that was made that it is really important to think about how that EAFP task force on monitoring can be revitalized, and possibly, you know, workshops like that, for example, data user group workshops, could be coordinated by the task force. The other key point I wrote down was we had a representative in our group from a local area in Australia where banding has been recently started again after quite a long gap. And this sort of led us into a conversation about monitoring for resightings data. And we sort of realized amongst the group that there's really no sort of formal methodology or even sort of simple guidelines on doing monitoring for resightings specifically. So separate from your monitoring where you're counting the birds, actually, you know, going out and recording leg flag sightings like Chris was talking about. So I think in general, what we said amongst the group is that if there's not someone who's actually part of their work, part of their paid position able to do this, then usually effort is pretty random, and it's usually driven by a small number of people within the local site who are really passionate about doing resightings. So again, some kind of a bit of a group think and producing some short practical advice for volunteers, which outlines, all right, if you don't have endless resources and you don't have too much effort, you know, what's the best way that you can structure your resightings monitoring so that you get the best use out of that effort. So those are the points that I wrote down, but invite anyone else who is in that group to correct me on anything or add anything else that I might have missed.
Anyone would like to add on to Misha's sharing?
Thank you, Misha. That was pretty good.
Thanks a lot, Bruce. Good to see you. So yes, Doug, please.
I'm very impressed by what the Queensland Waiter Study Group have been doing, and they've been going out and doing a lot of, their members have been going out and doing lots of observations for colour marked shorebirds. So that's been really well. You know, I'm very impressed by what QWSG's members have been able to do, and very pleased with that activity that the Queensland Waiter Study Group has sort of taken on. So I'm very pleased that that's happening at least in one place in Australia, where we've got a working group, which are a Shorebird team, which are looking locally and doing things locally. So I'm very pleased with that.
I wonder if they might be able to help with some advice on that then, you know, because I know they've got a very structured count program, which is also the case in the other local area we were talking about. But okay, you go out and do your monthly counts. There's quite a good structure for that. How do you actually incorporate resightings into that? For example, do you ask one person at each site to do it? Do you have someone go around to the sites and do it? How much of the effort? Do you have the same person counting as doing resight? You know, those really practical things, just 4 or 5 key points that are like, all right, if you've just started banding in an area, here's a couple suggestions on how to do good resightings monitoring in the same way that you do good structured monitoring of your normal counting. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. So we still have a group. I did not know they had a discussion or not. Breeding region, or I mean, shorebird breeding areas. I'm not sure if that had happened. I did had a response from Dimitri and Rick. So not sure, are they still around now? And were there any discussion at all about no response? Okay, fine. So I think breeding range of shorebird monitoring is a totally different issue. Fortunate this falls into Rick's very busy field work schedule, and I was sought to get one talk on breeding shorebird monitoring. We should feature that into the next presentation. So any of you want to do a sharing at the next webinar on shorebird monitoring, please let me know, because I saw this is a huge task, a lot of area we haven't touched on, and a lot of interest. And we should continue the discussion. I really appreciate, as for now, almost 3 hours later, we still have 31 people on this list, which normally people start a webinar with 10 or 15 people. So we are ending still with 30 over people. I'm amazed that we have more than 100 over people on the webinar today. Quite lucky we have a capacity of 300 people. That's why I was daring to promote here and there everywhere. So if we were using system less than 100, I'm not there to promote, because in case people don't have a chance to participate. So there's a lot of good discussion and never end. I don't want to drag on people further. So unless there's anyone have a last minute urgent issue want to share with everyone, we would like to call the webinar an end. 1, 2, 3, no one? Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, David.
Thanks a lot, everyone. I look forward to see you at the next webinar.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
David.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you very much.